On this episode, we put the brakes on our Project NX. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project NX2K. That's our 1993 Nissan NX2000. Today guys, following up the act of replacing all the suspension and handling components, we also need this car to brake as good as it handles. So everything's getting touched today. Pads, rotors, fluid. Let's get in the garage, get a little dirty. Time to do the front brakes on the NX2000. Pretty straightforward job guys. We're going to be doing rotors, pads, fluid obviously. Just something to be aware of. This looks a little greasy because I had some axle grease that I got on it, but these brakes are pretty bad. I already did the passenger side and I'll show you the condition of the pads because it's not too pretty. So first thing I'm going to do is 14mm to pull the sliding pins out of the back. We're going to clean those, re-grease them, you know they look bad. And then we're going to go ahead and pop that off, get the old pads off, pull the rotor, get that all freshened up. Sometimes those pins can be really stuck in there. No grease at all on it, just some old dry, very sticky grease from who knows how long ago. Now as we pull the caliper off here, we'll set it right on this jack to support it so it's not hanging from the brake line. You can see our pads right here. Yeah, check that out. Like I said, 10%, probably accurate, maybe like 8%, but super worn down there. Not much life left on these. I'm surprised they weren't squealing yet. Probably real close to that. Very even wear. One isn't worn more than the other. It's a good sign that our braking system and our caliper isn't sticking or doing anything weird. But these are toast. 17mm to get this caliper bracket off. Caliper bracket comes right off. I'm going to take a wire wheel to this. It's pretty crusty. Cleaned it up pretty good. Old rotor. Lots of deep grooves in it. Time for that to go away. Time for a little brake clean pre-rinse here before we put our new hardware on. Beautiful. Make sure we spray the back too. Perfect. There we go. Got a little greasy prints off there. I'll wire wheel this caliper bracket. Let's put some safety goggles on first. We clearly can't just use these rusty old caliper bolts anymore, so let's clean those up too. So we're going to attach our caliper bracket with our shined up bolts. Old pad versus new pad. Little discrepancy there in size. Next part we got to do is go ahead and retract the caliper piston back in. Long ways to go since these pads are almost empty. And we're going to do that with just a simple 4-inch C-clamp. Tighten this down and we'll get that back in there. I need to buy some new mechanics gloves, guys. I'm pretty hard on my handwear here. But anyway, we're just going to twist this back in. If you get stuck up and it's giving you a lot of resistance, back off a little bit. You don't want to destroy it. So you're going to see that piston starting to retract in there. And basically I like to stop when it's pretty much flush back. Because if not, you're not going to be able to squeeze it over your new pads, especially brand new pads. Okay, once it's all the way in, go ahead and back that off. It's now going to be time to slide our caliper right over our new pads. Should fit. Perfect. Now, before we just put those old sliding pins back in, it's time to clean them up because they are pretty gnarly looking. and then grease them up. Get a little shop towel, clean off that old, usually by this time it's pretty sticky caliper grease. Of course, you guys know what I'm gonna do first to these old. Any of you guys do the same stuff? Take a job, make a job way longer than it needs to be? I hope I'm not alone. For sliding pin grease, I just use random brake red grease here. Just be liberal with it. Put it on there, make it all nice and happy. You just want to have this thing be nice and lubricated so it doesn't seize. If you live in a rust belt area, these can tend to seize inside the caliper, and they're a pain in the butt if that happens. Usually you're getting a new caliper if they rust all the way in there. Something to be aware of on this car too. The top one is the thinner one, the bottom one is the thicker one. There are two different sliding pins on the front calipers of the NX. I think it's the same on the Sentra if I remember correctly, so keep that in mind. Thin one, skinny guy goes up top. Should shoot straight on. Let's clean up our bottom one, shall we? Oh yeah, super tacky. And that's the thing, some of this old grease, when it gets old, it kind of becomes sticky, which is the opposite of what a grease should do. Clean the bolt. Same deal with this bottom sliding pin. Grease it right up. Pro tip, you put a little extra at the end, and when you slide it in, it gets on that boot and pushes it further down. Kind of covers the bolt as you insert it. Cool. Now we just need to tighten those down with a 14mm wrench. And that's it. Once they're both tightened, give it a nice old squirt of brake clean. And we're done. Front brakes complete on the NX2000. Here on the rear of the NX2000, a little bit different than the fronts. Pretty standard though overall to what most vehicles from the time had. Two 12mm bolts here, pull off the slider pins. It's 17mm still on the caliper bracket bolt. That's pretty easy. The only other thing is we won't just be able to compress the piston. It does require one of those brake tools to wind it in as you compress it. And I'll show you guys when we get there. So just have your standard, pretty much universal brake toolkit and you'll be able to take care of that. It's pretty crusty here, so we're gonna hit this with a wire wheel, clean it up. Obviously I'm gonna throw fresh paint on it, just like I always do. But let's go ahead and get this off of here. These are crusted right on there. Pretty good pad life left on these, probably about 50 to 60% still on there, but they're just crusty and old, so I'm gonna put some better quality pads on this. Jeez, man. Yeah, you're out of there. Get that caliper bracket off, 17mm again. Just like the fronts. With those two bolts removed, this bracket should just slide right out. Ugh. Yeah, you know the drill. We're gonna clean that up with a wire wheel. Old rotor piece. Brake clean time. All right, let's put some fresh stuff on. Of course, we gotta clean all that hardware up. Let's put our new rotor on here. Let's put our bracket back on for the caliper. Now, if you don't like the caliper moving around, you can actually put the lug nuts back on just to hold it on for this step, but doesn't bother me. Go ahead and slide in our new pads at this time. Now it's time to reset our caliper, as we haven't done that yet. We will be using a caliper tool like this. Make sure it says LH. That's going to be for the left-hand side of the vehicle, which is the driver's side. Get this nice and tight first. It's kind of a pain in the butt as stuff wants to move around. Nothing fits perfectly with these universal brake tools, but get it nice and tight. And then you turn it to the right, and you're going to see that piston going back inside the caliper. Now it should turn freely if the piston on the brake is not moving freely. Don't force it, it could be seized up and you could destroy that piston. So do a couple turns, tighten this. All you're doing is putting tension between this little metal piece and the caliper. Go ahead and loosen your tool up. And slide it up, you'll see that piston's back, retract inside the caliper, we're good to go. And how you really know is when you go to slide over these fresh new thick pads, if it clears. And you guys guessed it, it's time to re-grease our slider pins. And since I'm sloppy with my handprints, let's give it one more brake clean bath. All right, looking fantastic. Time to clean up these calipers a little further, and you guys know what that means. Time to put some paint on there. After putting the wire wheel to the caliper, it's still not very pretty, so it's time to introduce a little friend called caliper paint. So we'll go ahead and brush some of this on in the weird fashion that I do and really make it pop. After doing the brake pads and rotors, it's time to get that old fluid out of there. A simple quick check shows you that we are dealing with coffee with no creamer. It is completely dark and needs to be replaced. So we're gonna get the old power bleeder out and get this old fluid out of the car. We've got our pressure bleeder all loaded up with fresh dot for. We'll get some paper towels ready just in the event that we spray brake fluid out. Sure, I've done that quite a few times. If you don't want that leaking everywhere, this stuff's pretty caustic. It'll mess up paint and other finishes. So we gotta get, I like around 15 PSI, maybe between 10 and 15 is fine, but let's see if we sealed this correctly. All right, with our pressure at almost 15 PSI, let's go crack our bleeder valves. We're gonna start with the passenger rear, work our way to the driver rear, then the passenger front, then driver front. Let's get that passenger rear first. You're going to want to get yourself a nice clear bottle so you can see the fluid coming out with some flexible hose attached to it that fits the diameter of the bleeder nipple on the brake caliper. So if you come back here, there's a little rubber cap you pull off. It's 10 millimeters to open the bleeder, so you want to put your wrench on there first in a position where you can turn it counterclockwise. Go ahead and squeeze our hose over, and you want that to be a super tight fit. You don't want air to get under there. And then once you have everything hooked up, you can crack open that bleeder valve and you're gonna see the old fluid come down the hose and go into this. Let's see what happens. When the fluid starts running clear, go ahead and close that bleeder valve up. We did a couple twists just to get it really going nice and tight. Pull our hose out, let that drain fully. Whoop. The hose is a little dirty over time because I've used it for multiple brake fluid changes, so it has a little golden hue to it, so don't mind that. The liquid coming out is pretty clear at this point. Of course, pull your wrench, replace your little bleeder nipple cap, and we're done. We're going to repeat that process for all three calipers. And here we are at the driver's side front. Our final caliper we need to bleed. Along the way, you want to keep checking your power bleeder to make sure it has brake fluid in it and keeping that pressure topped off because you do lose a little pressure in between. So let's go ahead and crank this last one. Get the rest of this old fluid out. And then rejoice in the fact that your system isn't full of brake fluid that looks like this anymore. It looks like a medium roast at least. I've seen extra dark roast before, but we got a medium here. Alright, let's safely remove the pressure to our power bleeder. I like to do this at the unit versus at the brake reservoir. So just slowly turn the top until you start to hear the pressure escaping and go very slow. Eye protection, of course. There you go. Okay, now we can start disconnecting the unit from the reservoir. With everything loosened up, you can go ahead and pull this off the reservoir. Go ahead and get the power bleeder out of the engine compartment. Check your fluid level. Looks great. Don't forget to put your cap back on. Job complete. New rotors, new pads, new fluid. This NX2000 is going to be stopping like a champ.